Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Gas South District's That's the Ticket, the ultimate podcast exploring all things Gas South District and a source for insights to events on campus and discussions on the wider entertainment and tourism industry. Please welcome the host of our show, Stan Hall, CEO of Gas South District and Explore Gwinnett.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Gas South District's That's the Ticket podcast. We appreciate you taking some time to be with us this afternoon. Today we're going to talk about the theater for all of you theater folks out there who love that, and so do we. Excited about our guest today. Our guest today is Cameron Archer. He's the Director of Theater Management for the theater here at Gas South District. This theater, for those of you who have been know this, has hosted so many impressive shows over the years, with many more to come. There's not many people in Gwinnett who haven't come through that theater at one time or the other for ballets or whatever it might be, but we're excited to talk about the theater today. And Cameron, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to hear more about how the arts are growing and evolving and talk about our wonderful theater here on our campus a little bit. Cameron, let's start out with this. Share a little bit of a brief history of the theater, what was the original purpose, and how it's sort of transcended over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank y'all for having me. Yeah, so, as you kind of mentioned, the theater's definitely has some tenure in Gwinnett. So it's been here just about 31 years, just over. So it was built in 93. It actually started, it was one of the first buildings they started building on campus, and they followed soon after with the convention center or forum at the time. It's had many names, it's had, many different management groups and things like that, but it's definitely been through, a lot as far as an asset to the community and the theater. It's spent a lot of time in the early days as like a place for, I actually know a lot of people that graduated there. Before the arena was here, before they were utilizing that or their own stadiums, they did their high school graduations there. It's boasted things like rehearsals. They did an REM rehearsal in the early 90s. It was kind of cool. So things like that, small, mid-sized things, and predominantly what it's really been known for is a space for community groups to perform. So a lot of performing arts groups, specifically ballets and dance. It's hosted its fair share of, dance competitions, pretty much every ballet group within probably a 50-mile radius, including Atlanta Ballet for some performances, a few years back, and Atlanta Ballet too. It's definitely seen, a lot of different kind of events in the space over the years.
Definitely has. Cameron, we were having a discussion before the show started today about some things that some folks here with us today didn't know about the theater. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the unique or even lesser known features about the theater that make it stand out? Yeah,
absolutely. I would say probably some of the biggest the biggest characteristics of the theater is that it is built as a true Broadway space.
Right.
When you consider the tech amenities that Gas South Theater has, it rivals, probably in the top 4 or 5 venues in Atlanta as far as theaters are concerned. The stage size itself, the number of line sets, which is like what you're hanging the sets and the backdrops on, the audio-visual system, the lighting systems, the back of house dressing room amenities, all of that is, very top tier in what it was designed to be. And it's kind of not as well known because it's only got 700 seats. So while it hasn't necessarily seen its, full share of touring musicals and things like that, because of the house size, it definitely can accommodate from the tech side.
And you talk about the number of seats in there, but even though it is a lesser number than we probably would like, how does that compare to the other theaters in this area as far as seats go?
Yeah, even being on the smaller side for, touring, mid-size and major touring, we're definitely still ranking in the top, 4 to 5. So we're, kind of right there in line with, the Fox is obviously the biggest in Atlanta. There's Cobb Energy, Sandy Springs. I think the Rialto is a comparable space on house, but not necessarily on tech. And then Gas South is pretty much right behind, right in that same group. So it's definitely still a big space and can accommodate a lot. I think of a lot of community groups have taken note of that they can, they can do less performances. Being able to host the audience that it can. So, yeah, it's definitely a great space.
Absolutely. So, you and I know about this, but for the folks listening today, the theater here on the Gas South campus recently underwent some renovations.
Yeah.
So what inspired that project, and tell us a little bit about some of the improvements that were made.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we kind of did twofold in the space. So we kind of did a lot related to brick and mortar and facility and just kind of, keeping those things that have hit the shelf life, things like roof and EIFS and exterior. But we've also spent a lot of time and energy and resources on, the things outside of that. We've done refurbishment of the front of house and back of house. We've spent a lot of time on what you'd consider like theater systems, so the AV systems, the rigging systems, the lighting systems in the space, and really honestly, where I took a lot of inspiration from that is, one, investing back into an asset that's been such a key part of campus and the community over the years, but also kind of restoring it to a state-of-the-art facility. It was really, when it was designed in 93, it was probably one of the most well-designed spaces in the Southeast. And definitely, doing what we can to kind of reinvest and bring a lot of that back up.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, for the people who may have been here years ago and haven't seen it in the past 2 or 3 years, I think they would see a pretty noticeable difference just in the aesthetics of it that you described when you first walk in the door, though.
No, absolutely. I mean, between that and I hope that those even sitting in the seats in the house are seeing a higher level of production value and quality, bringing in everything from new lighting to more advanced systems and things like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned in your earlier remarks today about the history of it as far as dance and ballet, and I can certainly address that with my daughter coming up through the ballet over the years. I've been there many times for that. But we're going through sort of intentional programming change a little bit, and talk a little bit about how the theater is evolving from being more of a venue just for dance recitals and some of the things you talked about, to hosting Broadway-style shows, the comedy and the bands, all that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I definitely think, one of the biggest key things that we're doing right now as we kind of shift what the space is from a programming standpoint is really that it is still remaining a place for the community, but kind of changing what that definition is. So I kind of mentioned, predominantly it's been a space for community groups to come perform, whether that's a recital group, a theater group, a dance group, whatever that is. Even, we've had some symphonies and things like that in the community that have utilized it as a space. Now, I think our programming initiatives are how can we serve the greater Gwinnett community and our greater audience, those people that aren't necessarily affiliated with, a dance school or a recital group or an arts organization that they would be affiliated to and just come because they're a part of that. How can we bring content that is not currently in Gwinnett, whether it's, Broadway tours that are currently only in Atlanta or Athens or Greenville, or if it's, just growing the content that is in Gwinnett or bringing it closer to their backyard if other venues aren't nearby. So really kind of becoming a place for, the greater community to experience the arts.
Cameron, when you're thinking about that, as far as that sort of change in programming to a much broader perspective, how do you decide on the types of performances and events to bring to the theater? And you've done a great job of sampling over the past 2 years, but how do you make those decisions? Is it monetary based? Is it exposure to the community, exposure to the theater, or how does that all work out?
It's a little bit of all that. And I actually do think, transparently, we're still in a place where we're figuring that out. We've kind of we're probably in our second year of kind of revisiting programming as a whole. So we tried just about everything, and we will continue to do that. So, we take a lot from, what's maybe working in other markets that are comparable to us, whether that's Athens or Atlanta or even around us in Gwinnett. I think we also take notes from the convention center and the arena of kind of what's working for them that we could scale down, and add to the theater. And even like our history, we see that, XYZ genre does well, so we find a way to bring a different scale or a different caliber into the space and kind of grow it that way.
That theater has the potential to do just about anything. One thing I remember, and I'm going to talk to you about this in a minute, I'm a big fan of the whole TEDx world, if you will. I just think that's such an interesting way to hear about things that you don't know about, the way that it's presented. And you guys did TEDx talks at the theater. How did that go? Yeah,
that actually went really well. I think it was certainly something that it's kind of given us maybe a market that we hadn't considered or pursued in the past, kind of gave us a little dip of our toes into it. I think realistically looking at like stuff like that and more corporate stuff on the weekdays is going to be key.
Yeah.
It actually goes hand in hand. So when that came into the space, we were still undergoing our AV renovation, but we actually wrapped that up actually this month. They're wrapping up work from a 2-year project in there. And so we're adding a ton of things like live streaming and video capability that we can like run a full professional live streamed either, A, recordings for like post editing, but B, live streams and things like that for those TEDx events, for those corporates with, keynote speakers and things like that.
I've always thought that theater would be the perfect spot for a presidential debate.
Yeah.
And I've seen them at venues smaller than what we have.
Yeah.
The one that I'm trying to think of was probably 2 presidential elections ago, but they had it at a small university in Tennessee. The theater wasn't as big as ours, and the stage was just perfect for it. It was all telecast, but that would be the perfect spot for something like that for sure. Are there, as you start evolving in this new programming, are there any performances or events that stand out so far that you think were particularly impactful or more or memorable as to how you might plan for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first one that comes to mind, it might be because it's so recent, but I definitely, we hosted the Share Show just about a month ago. That was probably by far the most complex and largest show that space has ever seen.
It was a Broadway production.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is by all rights a Broadway tour. They actually came, they spent about a week with us. They did preview performances on top of that. So they came in and did tech rehearsals. They got everything ready for the second leg of the tour, and they actually left from here and I think ended up in Orlando. But that show itself was, successful in almost every right, if not every right.
Live music.
Space. Yeah, live music, full use of the orchestra pit,
Yep.
Use of pretty much every tech amenity that it was designed for, that was state of the art. 30 years ago, they were checking every box. So it was pretty impressive to see come together.
I think I've talked to you before. I do love Broadway, and when I heard about this show coming, I was a little leery. But I've told you, so this is not going to be news to you. I thought that was such an impressive production that you guys put on, and literally for somebody who does like live performances such as Broadway plays, whatever it might be, there was no noticeable difference in the production of that performance at our theater than anything I've seen at the Fox. That's how close I thought it was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're right there on it.
Cameron, you talked a little bit about the past as far as some things that have happened in there, but what truly is the role that this theater plays in our community, and so how do you sort of engage with the residents as you're thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our biggest impact right now is being a space to bring content to their backyard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, we touched on the Broadway tour a second ago. I think that's what it is it's bringing things that they're normally driving out of the county for into the county, or bringing visitors into the county that wouldn't normally be in the space. So it's a combination of that and really figuring out ways that we can continue to partner with our community groups that have been such, great assets to the space over the last 30 years and kind of grow with them as well.
You work here for the Gas South District overall organization, the CVB, all of that. But you didn't come here to be involved with the theater. Tell us a little bit about how you came here, and then talk about your past that led you to the role you have here now on our staff. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been at 2 municipal theaters. So I was at the City of Beaufort at the Beaufort Community Center for a while as a contractor, and then I also was at the City of Sugar Hill with the Eagle and the Bowl and the space they have up there. And actually was doing that while I was in school. So I graduated school, found a role here actually in accounting. Which is
I remember.
What you're hinting at.
Yeah.
And found it as a great shoe-in to something bigger and something a little more in line with my major. And I quickly realized that was maybe not the fit for me. But it great team, just not necessarily first time doing anything like that. Just wasn't something that I really connected with. And an opportunity opened up and we explored it and haven't looked back since.
Well, I think the timing for us was certainly wonderful. I remember the first meeting we had with you when we were talking about sort of bringing you over to the theater and coming up with a business model for it. And after listening to you for about 15 minutes, I said, that's definitely the guy who needs to be running that theater. And so it's all history since then. But I'm glad we found you for one thing, and certainly glad that we turned that into something else that's right up your alley. So was there a defining moment with you, Cameron? I know you're still a very young man, but was there a defining moment that inspired your career that you knew you wanted to be in theater management?
Honestly, I don't know if there necessarily is. I actually ended up in events by sheer chance. My first job I actually thought was in like the tech side of theater, and it wasn't. It was rolling tables and setting up chairs in a ballroom. I spent a lot of time with my first boss. He was a great mentor to me, and that probably is really what led me to like the venue management, theater professionally as a whole.
What takes place on the stage is what people come to see.
Yeah.
But they have no idea of everything that has to happen
absolutely.
before they ever sit down in those seats to
Yeah.
see the performance, all those things that happen. Talk a little bit, Cameron, about what's the most rewarding part of running the theater and what's the most challenging part of it for you?
Yeah, I'll definitely say no part is easy, especially in the growing phase that we're in right now with adding programming, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. It's important to recognize that not everything is a win financially, but is maybe a win in every other right, as we're trying and piloting new things. So I'd say that's definitely challenging, balancing a lot of these like capital renovation projects that we're doing in the midst of the event schedule. But probably the most rewarding is seeing things as a whole come together, holistically looking at the Share Show. That was a project that we had been working on for a year. So seeing that come together and actually come full circle was very, very rewarding. Same thing with like major projects like the AV system, or, right now we're doing some early preliminary pricing on renovating the house. Like things like that kind of coming to an end is very, very rewarding to see the finished product that we've all been talking about for 2 or 3 years.
Definitely. As Gwinnett continues to grow, not only in population, but in the diversity that we all brag about in Gwinnett County, being one of the most diverse counties, and certainly in the Southeast, I would say, how does that bode for the appetite for theater and the arts as we continue to grow, again, not only in size, but the number of people coming from different backgrounds here? How do you think that'll affect the...
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually a positive. I think it's leading towards the growth and the need for more diverse types of arts and programming, especially in spaces of this scale. You see very diverse, content and things like the arena, very large facilities, the convention center, but scaling it down to the theater, I think is really important. We have some great partners that are kind of bringing some of those diverse events already. So it's very encouraging to see that those are boding successful for them, and that'll be something that we kind of continue and then also start kind of pushing forward ourselves.
If you think about, again, Gwinnett's changing, but if we talk about topics that are urban versus suburban, why do you think that the urban feel is always one that's more advantageous for the love of the arts than perhaps what has typically taken place in the suburbs?
Yeah, I think if nothing else, when I think of urban and the arts, I think of culture, and I think of bring things together, and I think that it's a great connector for that, and it's a great facilitator as a theater, as a performing arts center, even as an extension being attached to the Hudgens Art Center on campus. I think that's really checking a lot of boxes and really has, affords us the opportunity to kind of explore that further and really be that culture center for our campus.
And you've had conversations with the Hudgens about doing some dual things, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're working right now on piloting things like jazz in the garden or in the theater with the with the Hudgens Art Center galleries, and as an extension of that, we were working together on programming initiatives now where we could line up the galleries with events in the theater, open them both up for sponsors and donors and things like that before the shows, all kinds of things like that.
Absolutely. So, Cameron, as you think about not only the past but the future, what is your vision for the Gas South District Theater next 5 or 10 years? Where do you see it becoming?
Absolutely. I think the two biggest things that I see is, something we're still trying to crack the code on, I think, is figuring out anchor tenant programming or, programming with longer sit downs. That's going to make us more efficient. It's also going to help with, our exposure to the community and getting people in the door. I think additionally, the second big thing we're going after right now is really honing in on what does our annual year look like? What's that consistency year over year that, we're always having XYZ type of content, and that's kind of becoming a staple for us. So I think just developing that more and kind of starting to rinse and repeat and execute that through so people know what they're looking to the space to see.
What's the advantage or disadvantage of having, and we talked about live performances, of having an actual in-house performing theater group that use that as their main stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest positive residual there is, it affords us the opportunity to really advertise something that's got longer tenure. You get more economies of scale advertising something with 10 performances than one. So you can be a lot more effective, and you stand a lot better chance of getting people in the door. And the biggest residual being, they get in the door and they look at your calendar on the wall and they see you've got 3 other things coming up. And, you build your trust with, XYZ happening each year from that consistent group or consistent provider of content. And then they start, dabbling into I'm going to try this comedy show. I'm going to try this, symphony I see because I've enjoyed the experience I've had here thus far.
So as we're having our conversation today, Cameron, we're coming off of Thanksgiving, leading into Christmas and the holiday season. Are there any things coming up in the next couple of weeks relative to that and even beyond that you can share with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. The 3 biggest things that come to mind right now is, kind of mentioning the anchor content. We have Gwinnett Ballet Theater in the space. So they've actually partnered with us this season as they're the resident ballet theater or resident ballet company in residence.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, long circle. But they have 2 weeks of the Nutcracker actually opening this Friday. So we're super excited for that. It's been a very good, positive relationship for the both of us and a positive partnership.
That's also a live orchestra production.
Yeah, that is. So they'll utilize the orchestra pit and they'll do some great shows. They have school shows as well during the week. So that's a great way to give back to the community there. Additionally, we're kind of in the midst of our second tribute series. We're kind of right smack in the middle. So we've got some great shows like Bee Gees Gold, which is a tribute, as well as Queen Nation in January, right around the corner. And the third biggest is the Addams Family. You mentioned enjoying the Cher show. The Addams Family is launching its first national tour, and we're fortunate enough to be a stop on that. So they'll be here in April.
Wow. Okay. Got some big plans coming up. So we're all excited to see where it's going to go, and certainly as someone who's all about Gas South District, I'm excited about where it's already what you've done for it so far. So thank you for that. So Cameron, we appreciate you being with us today and talking to us. If there's anyone looking for more information about events they might attend, where can they find information about Gas South Theater? Everything is gassoutdistrict.com, and we've got all of our events listed there with the arena, convention center. You can filter through and sort through there, and check us out. Sounds good. Well, I hope the folks listening will come out and check out Gas South District Theater. If you haven't been there, you need to take a visit, and I'm sure you'll be pleased with what you see there. But again, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you. Well, guys, that's all the time we have today. Please be sure to check out gassoutdistrict.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and TikTok. You can find all episodes of Gas South District, That's the Ticket, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you soon when we return for another episode of That's the Ticket. Goodbye.
Thanks for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. For show notes and further information about Gas South District and upcoming events, please visit our website at gassoutdistrict.com. That's the Ticket.